All right, today we're talking about Manipura cleansing. It's a way to reclaim your mental clarity, and we're going to get into a pretty fascinating technique from our source material that says it can tackle the problem right at its root.
You ever have one of those days where it feels like your mind just has a mind of its own? You know, that constant chatter in your head, that looping internal dialogue that you just can't seem to shut off? Well, you're not alone. But what if I told you the source of all that noise isn't what you think it is? The source material we're looking at today, it points to a cause that might actually surprise you.
So, let's get into it. The mind's hidden impulses. Where does all that mental noise really come from? We're going to explore what's actually driving that constant conversation in your head.
Okay, so here's a wild idea from our source material. Get this. A lot of your thoughts, they might not actually be your own. The source claims many of them are kicked off by what it calls parasitic entities. Yeah, non-physical influences that can trigger all that internal chatter. It's a pretty radical idea, right? It totally reframes the whole problem of having an overactive mind. And that right there, that might explain why so many meditation practices feel like a losing battle. You know, you're trying to calm the brain, but according to the source, the real source of the mental noise isn't even in the brain. It's hidden deeper. So if those impulses are starting somewhere else, you're really only treating the symptom, not the actual root cause. So if the brain is just the receiver, then what's the transmitter? Let's dig into what the source material calls the true source of it all, your center of will. And that center is identified as the Manipura chakra. It's located right in your solar plexus. And you can think of it as the engine of your willpower. It's like the central command for your everyday consciousness, the starting point for literally everything you do. I mean, just think about how powerful that is. The source says that every action, thought, or shift in attention is preceded by an impulse from the Manipura. So before you even form a thought, before you move a muscle, or even just shift your attention from one thing to another, a little impulse first fires from this exact spot. Every single conscious act starts right here. But wait a second. That brings up a pretty big question, doesn't it? If the Manipura is what starts everything, well, what starts the Manipura? What's sending that initial impulse? Well, according to our source, this is exactly where things start to go wrong. For a lot of us, this system hasn't just gone wrong, it's been hijacked. So let's look at the difference between how it should work and how it often does work. On one hand, you have the ideal function. Your Manipura is supposed to be this clean channel for your higher self, right? It takes your true intentions and turns them into action. But then there's the common reality. It's chronically overworked, overexerted, and constantly being fueled by all sorts of external interference. So what kind of interference are we talking about? The source gets pretty specific. It mentions things like energetic implants, negative programs, which are basically thought forms or patterns that aren't even yours. And of course, those parasitic entities we talked about earlier. All of these things are what generate that constant, useless internal dialogue. And what's the result of all this? Well, it's a huge energy drain. Just look at this breakdown. The source suggests that a massive chunk of our personal energy, maybe half of it, just goes to fueling useless internal dialogue. Another big piece goes to automatic behaviors and fears. And look what's left over. This tiny little sliver, maybe 10%, for the things that really matter, like self-realization and our own health. It's pretty shocking when you see it laid out like that. Okay, so that's the diagnosis. Kind of grim, right? But now for the prescription. Let's get into the good stuff, the practical, actionable part. We're going to walk through the relaxation technique to actually reclaim control. It's a pretty straightforward 4-step process. First things first, just find a comfortable posture where you can relax. Step 2, you're going to bring all of your attention to your solar plexus area. For step 3, you just observe. You're trying to notice those little subtle impulses before they bloom into a full thought or a movement. And then step 4, and this is the absolute key, every time you feel one of those impulses bubble up, you consciously relax your solar plexus to extinguish it. Think of it like relaxing a tense muscle. You feel it and you let it go. And here's a little pro tip from the source to make this even more powerful. Before you start, you can set a simple intention. Something like, let my Manipura be pure and free. It just helps focus your mind and direct your energy right where you want it to go. Now, what happens when you actually do this consistently? Well, the result is supposed to be a really profound state of inner peace. You start the process of actually reclaiming your own inner stillness. And there are some pretty clear signs that it's working. You'll start to notice a deep stillness, not just in your mind, but in your whole body. That internal dialogue, it might just stop for long periods of time. And as those negative attachments start to lose their grip, things like chronic fears, that constant fatigue, and obsessive thoughts can all start to fade away.
And this is so important to understand. You're not just creating silence for the sake of silence. By clearing out all that static, you're actually opening up a clean channel to your higher self. And that, according to the source, leads to a really profound clarification of your whole consciousness.
But it gets even better. Mastering this technique leads to what is maybe the most powerful outcome of all, what the source calls immunity to influence.
This is where everything we've talked about really comes together. Think about it. If every single action, even just the simple act of paying attention, starts with an impulse from your Manipura, well, then having a clean, controlled Manipura means that you get to decide what gets your attention. The source claims this makes you pretty much immune to negative external transmissions trying to grab your focus. And that leaves us with one final, pretty powerful question to think about. If you control the source of your own attention, who or what can control you?